Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be going over how to do a controller install on the Talaria XXX. The X9000 is what I already have on my bike. This here is a buddy of mine's, and this should apply to all the different kinds of controllers. Today we're going to be putting on a Sting R controller though. Okay, so to start, before we do anything on this bike, we're going to want to disconnect the battery. Make sure there's no power going anywhere on this bike, and nothing will get fried. You're going to have to remove this bolt for your lower shock mount. That will allow this battery door to swing open enough where you can get your hand up in there to unplug it. Okay, I got the battery disconnected. It is a little easier if you drop the swing arm, but it is possible without doing that. To start, you're going to want to remove this faceplate, 4 bolts for the controller, and 4 bolts for your bash guard. After you remove those, you're going to have 3 plugs that are connected to each other, or connected to the main harness. You're going to want to grab a pick and disconnect those. Your first 2 on this side are going to be your 4-pin, which is your wiring for your throttle, and your 8-pin, but only has 6 wires in it. That's going to be for the rest of the bike, like your sensors and stuff like that. On these bikes, they're IPM motors, and they have encoders on them. It's going to be a 7 wire, but it's an 8-pin connector. It's going to be this last one right here. Once those are disconnected, you have your 2 power wires and your 3 phase wires for your motor. Now if the controller's off, we can throw that off to the side. It's not going to be needed anymore. So now that we have the controller out of the way, you're going to notice you have this big bundle of wires, a whole bunch of stuff going everywhere. We want to take the main harness out so it's easier to work on when we have to identify and repin everything. Because there's 2 ways to do this. You can either use the connectors that a standard Talaria would have, which is these big ones, or you can use the smaller ones like this. It all depends what you want to do and which ones you order. Either way, one of them is going to have to be changed either on the controller side here or on the harness side here. So now that the controller's out of the bike, we're going to want to remove all 5 of these bolts to take this cover off. And behind there, your charge port has a little connector that needs to be disconnected. From there, you can see the main harness. And we're going to start unplugging all the different plugs that are in here. In order to remove this headlight, we have 3 bolts. 1 on the bottom here, and one on each side connecting it. And the headlight just wiggles out. There is a 4-pin connector right here that you need to unplug. Now the last thing you need to do is remove this cover, which is 3 bolts, one up top, one on each side, and that allows you to disconnect 3 different wires in there. Inside of here, you have one wire, or one connector for your push button, one for the RFID, and the last one for your tail lights. On the side of the bike here, there's one zip tie. You're gonna have to clip that to pull the harness off. And on the other side of the bike, there is an 8 clamp with a screw that attaches to the frame that holds this harness up. Lastly, we have to disconnect all the sensors, switches, and the display up top on the handlebars. Now that everything's out, we can pull the harness. Oh, looks like I forgot a zip tie down here. Clip that off. Bend this little metal tab and wiggle the harness out. So coming over to this one, this part of the harness has 2 plugs coming out, a 6-pin and a 2-pin. The 2-pin is for a key switch, and the 6-pin is for your RFID. If you want to bypass RFID on this bike, you can get rid, or not get rid of, you can move this white red wire right here over to this red black wire on this 2-pin. D-pin this connector, put it in this connector, which I will show later on, and that will allow you just to use the switch on the top without having to use your RFID. Moving past that, we have another 6-pin over here, but it's a single part of the harness. There's no other plugs on this one. This is the one that goes to your battery. You have a green white and a blue white. Those are part of your communication system, because the battery, controller, and display all communicate with each other. You also have another white red, your red, which is your main power. On the back side, you have a green, which is obviously ground, and your red black, which is your signal. This one right here is for your headlight. It's a 4-pin. That one does not get used, that's why it's plugged. And this 4-pin's for your headlight. This single strand right here with 3 connectors on it. 2 of them, your 2-pin and your 4-pin right here. These 2 are for your RFID and your switch. And this last one right here, which is a 3-pin, that is for your tail light. So when it comes to the controllers, your Sting R controller has two 9-pin plugs, one black, one white, and then your brown wire, which most people snip. But your XXX controller has 4 plugs on it. One of them, this one right here, see if it'll focus. This one right here is not used. It's useless for us. You have your brown wire right in there. Your 8-pin and your 4-pin, that goes to the bike, the main harness for the bike. And you have a 8-pin here, which is 7 wires, and that's for your encoder sensor on the bike. All this stuff here, these 3, are going to be used on the Sting R controller. Now that I got the wire harness torn apart, one thing that you will notice with this harness is that wire colors do not match up. That's why I like to tear these harnesses apart, figure out exactly what goes where. When it comes to these, I do like to remove all the sensor wires in this harness. So for example, you have your tilt sensor. I remove the tilt sensor out of the bike. I will also remove the connector and the entire and all the wires associated with it out of the harness too, because these here are just failure points later on. Here's your kickstand sensor, then your 2 brake stand sensors up on the handlebars. I'll remove all the wires out of this harness for that. Once those are removed, I will show you the different colors and what each color is, what it does. I will go over that a little later. So now that the harness is all the way apart, I'm going to go over your sensors first. These 2 here, they have a red inside. There are 2 pins. These are for your brake sensors. I'll be taking these out. You'll notice this here is a white-black wire. White-black coming out of each one, which go to a black and then a green-yellow. The black is your 12-volt positive. This green-yellow is your signal going up to your controller to let the controller know to shut the bike off, or to kill power on it whenever these sensors are engaged for the brakes. Past that, we have your tilt sensor, which is going to have 3 wires going to it. Green is ground, black is your 12-volt, and then this yellow-blue right there, that is going to be your signal to your controller to also let it know that it needs to shut the bike off. The next and last, the last one is going to be your kickstand sensor, also a 3-wire. It's going to be green for your ground, black for your power, your 12-volt, and then your purple right there, that's going to be your signal wire going to the controller to let it know to shut it off. Those 4 different sensors, I like to remove all of them as they're just failure points later on down the road, and I take them all the way out of the harness. So for example, your black, which is your power, that's going to have a central point where it all ties in together with all your other black wires for your 12-volt, which is right here. So I'm going to unwrap this, which is the electrical tape, and cut it off where it connects. So that way there's no wires poking out, nothing can be shorted, and then when I'm done, I'll rewrap it in electrical tape. Same goes for the rest of this harness. As you can see, it's just a bunch of bare wires. And when I finished, I will put friction tape back on it. I like to use 3M friction tape on these harnesses, as I've never had an issue with that before. When it comes to what wires I like to remove out of the harness for the sensors and everything, going up here to your 8-pin and your 4-pin, These are the ones that connect to the stock controller. I'm going to start with the 4-pin. This here is for your throttle and for your brake sensor. So you have a red, white, green, white, black, white. Those three are throttle. And then this green, yellow right here, that's for your brake sensor. I like to remove this one, get that one out. And then on your 8-pin over here, which is only 6 wires though, because 2 of them are blocked or have little stoppers in there. On this one, you have a purple wire that goes to your kickstand sensor. I like to remove that purple wire. And you have a yellow blue right here. That goes to your tilt sensor. You can also remove that one. Those 3 wires on the main plug-in for the controller, you do not need at all. It's not necessary for it to run. For this XXX harness, there's a lot of wires in here that are not used because this XXX is also a road legal version. So you have things like turn signals and extra switches that are not on the US version of this. So all the stuff that's plugged off like that, I like to get rid of. So this whole harness here, I will pull out of it. And this one over here, same thing. I'll get rid of this whole portion, get rid of all the wires because they're not needed for the install, and it's not needed in the harness. So now that I repinned this, I'm just using this 8-pin connector since I got rid of all the other sensors. I'm going to go through the wires that I have in here for this one. So I have my 3 throttle wires right here. It's going to be your black, white, red, white, green, white. Your start button wire is pink. And then on the other side, your signal wire to let the controller know to turn on is your red, black. And the 2 communication wires is your green, white, and blue, white. That is all that you're going to be connecting to the controller besides your encoder sensor, or your encoder. So on the controller here, there we go. I'm going to be keeping all the wires on the white plug. 7 of the wires for this white plug are for the encoder. 2 of them, it's going to be this blue white and the white green. Those 2 are for the communication. And on this black plug here, I'm going to be keeping the 3 top right here, black, green, red with the white stripes, because those are for your throttle. The pink in the dead center right there, since that's your start button. And this red, the red black one right there, that red black one I will also be keeping. These other 4 wires of the violet or purple, depending on how you look at it, yellow, blue, green, yellow, and yellow, red, those I will be getting rid of. They're not going to be part of this harness, since those are just for sensors, and this yellow, red was never used to begin with. So when it comes to all these different wires that you're connecting together for the controller, all the colors will match except one. That's going to be this violet one right here. That one right there, that violet one. And this black with a very faint blue line. right there. Those are the only two that will not match up, but they do go together. Everything else is color coded appropriately and will match up according. This here, for the one that doesn't match, is for the encoder on that 8-pin. So when it comes to mounting this, you'll notice you have one mounting bracket here and another one down here. But on the controller, because the controller is bigger, the points do not line up. If you look on the other side, over here, this mounting bracket can actually be down here. Because this is the this here is the mounting piece for the skid plate. But you can move this mounting bracket for the controller down here, and then you can mount the controller with no issues. And now, mounting points will line up between them. That goes for this controller so far. I know that on the X9000, you do not use this bottom bracket at all, and you actually mount it to this cross beam right here. That cross beam is what you mount it to for the X9000. You're gonna have to drill 2 holes in there, tap them out, but it's not too bad. So once the harness is wrapped back up, I like to use 3M Temflex. It's a friction tape. Come on. This stuff works amazing for doing harnesses, and it's pretty much the same stuff that they use from the factory. You gotta put this harness back in. For this one, he wanted a RFID delete, so it's just the push button up top. So I took that the white red wire, and I pinned it out into the 2-pin that we saw earlier, and it's connected to this red black wire right here. That allows RFID bypass and lets you just use the push button to start the bike. When you're routing it up through, make sure you go behind this crossbar right here. You have a little metal tab that you want to put the harness in. Bend that over because that helps hold the harness in place. Bend that up. Harness runs behind the brake line for the rear brake, like that. And then up here, and right here, that's where you need to zip tie the harness to. For everything up here, you're just going to tuck it back how it was from before when you pulled it off, and plug everything right back into how it was. The install, or the install for this is the same as the removal, just reverse process. Now that everything's connected back, this has dielectric grease in, sealed it up from moisture and dirt. Tuck everything else back in, push the controller up. It might be a little bit of a tight fit. Just make sure you're not crushing any wires or have anything screwed up inside of there. Now that the controller's in, you may notice that you don't have your mounting brackets anymore for your bash guard. That's the only issue that I've been running into, is that you need to modify this bash guard in order to fit this now. When it comes to the X9000, you can see that I ended up cutting the bash guard and modifying it to fit for this bike. From there, we still have this side panel, which is right here, with your charge port that you have to connect. Do not forget about that, otherwise your bike will not charge. Now that's installed, we have this cover up here for the horn, which has 3 bolts in it. And put that back on. Moving on up to here, we have all these cables that need to be reconnected. Reconnect to whichever one originally came out of. So you have your throttle for one of them. Make sure you line up your arrows on the 2 cables. You have your display for another. And you have your headlight switch with horn. Connect all those. You got to route your RFID switch and taillight one going around the back here. Don't forget to put that 8 clamp back on the back side over there. And then start connecting your wires back up. For this, don't forget, you have to grab the top plate here, and then this needs to be connected and bolted back down with the 3 bolts. 2 on the side, 1 on the top. There's even a little groove right there for that wire to go into. Last but not least is your headlight. Which is this one plug. These 2 extra plugs that I have in here are for other accessories that I added in for the owner, as he wanted more lights. But for your bike, and most people's bikes, should be 1 plug right here. And then you have 3 bolts, 2 on the side, 1 on the bottom. And most importantly, don't forget to plug your battery back in, close the lid. And once you figure out how to mount your bash guard, however you want to modify it, it's up to you. Get that mounted up, and your bike is good to go. You're now running a new controller.